Hello, everyone, and welcome to another elite episode of the Get Authentic with Marques show. I'm your host, Marques Ogden. On today's episode, we are joined by Mr. Jojo McManus. But before we get Jojo to the stage, I want to thank one of our amazing sponsors, Tactical Harmony. If you're feeling the weight of pressure in today's unpredictable world, you need to know Rebecca Fitzsimmons. She's a former NCIS special agent turned leadership coach, keynote speaker, and founder of Tactical Harmony. She's led at the highest levels, from leading her teams through high-risk missions to guiding teams through everyday change management in the private sector. Now she helps ambitious professionals, leaders, and companies build a victory mindset to defy the ordinary and operate at peak performance in their careers and beyond. She gives you the competitive edge to win more and stress less. If you want to build an unshakable leadership and build a mindset that wins, visit tacticalharmony.com to learn more. If you're looking for your next keynote speaker, Rebecca is someone who will leave your audience fired up and ready to lead. Now, here he is. Jojo, how you doing today, Jojo?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, my friend. First question, Jojo. What does the word authentic/authenticity mean to you?
It's an interesting question. I think for me, it just means that you're being true to yourself, true to who you really are. If we're talking about authentic people, right? That's all.
You know, Jojo, that's very interesting. I really like how you said being true to who you are, because a lot of times people are true to who they think they are, or worse yet, right, Jojo, are true to who people want them to be, but not to who they are, who they want to be. So it's very compelling. Again, ladies and gentlemen, be true to who you are and who you are meant to be. That's the key to being authentic. Jojo, tell us more about yourself, where you're from, a little bit of your history, and what you're doing currently now.
So I'm originally from a small town south of Boston, Massachusetts called Carver, or in Massachusetts speak, Cava. Originally from there, grew up in a very diverse family in a white flight town outside the city. I spent most of my growing up years there, but then moved to Washington, D.C., your hometown, for high school. Went on to college, first in my family. And eventually got into the field of education, was a professor, and focused on anti-racism and diversity and inclusion, what we call inclusive excellence in higher education, and became, senior diversity officer at a couple of institutions. Then it began advising presidents and other diversity officers and executives for a number of years. And, I'm in higher education today, working in Ohio, actually. So
very nice. And so what high school did you go to in Washington, Jojo?
I started out at DeMatha and then blew my knee out. I was a basketball player. So I had to leave, and I ended up going to St. Andrews and graduating there.
Okay, I know St. Andrews very well. So I am a St. John's graduate, and my brother is a St. Albans graduate. So very familiar, very nice. I love this. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Jojo, let's chat about, where'd you go to college, by the way?
As an undergrad, I went to Florida Tech. I got my PhD at Florida A&M University.
Very good. Oh, I'm a Howard grad. So we got a lot of things going on here, my good friend. This is awesome. So Jojo, what was it that really led you to get into higher education from the standpoint of diversity, equity, and inclusion? I think that's fantastic. My god sister is in the same field, give or take, and she went to Spelman in Atlanta. That's where she ended up going for her college and getting her degree. And she's now Dr. Erica Edwards, and she's phenomenal. I think the world of her. So I'd like to hear more about what was it that really led you into that career.
Well, I think the original sort of impetus was that I grew up in a very diverse family. And if you know Massachusetts at all, you'll get this. But I grew up in a family that was Jewish and Irish. My dad being Irish, mom being Jewish. Those two groups of folks didn't get along very well. oftentimes in the city. And then my brother was adopted when I was a year old, and he was just a baby. And he's African American. And so the things that he went through that I witnessed, and the things that I went through as his brother, and seeing what he was experiencing, led me to care a lot as a young person, of course, around issues of race and racism. Also, considering that I'm Jewish, the issues of anti-Semitism. We grew up in the back of a liquor store, so there were a lot of sort of class and socioeconomic issues as well. So all of those different aspects of what we call diversity and inclusion were a normal part of my growing up. And when we lost my brother, Casey, it sort of made me think about what could I do, and what were the things that were contributing the most to the challenges that he experienced and that so many others experienced, and that in part led to our losing him. And that was schools and education, right? A lot of the issues around race and racism were supported and perpetuated through what we were taught in schools or what was left out. So as I sort of advanced in my academic career, I started thinking about what could I do. I went into teacher education and eventually moved up into administration in higher ed, and doing this work at the highest levels that I could.
This is really, really riveting because my grandmother was born in the 1920s, actually 1929 to be exact, in Little Rock, Arkansas. So my great grandparents, Era Lee and Martin Bratton, they actually moved from Little Rock to Detroit to raise my grandmother. And I think she had total 10 brothers and sisters. And my grandmother then moved to Washington, D.C., and she became an educator. She became a teacher, gave back. And I remember my entire life, always education over everything else. Me, because my brother has played in the NFL for 12 years, first ballot Hall of Famer. We were raised by a single dad. And our dad was one of the first in his family, if not the first, to go to college. He went to Howard as well. He graduated. He got his degree in economics. He went to Maryland for his master's, and he was really successful in the world of finance. So before we get into more about what you're trying to work on, some of your initiatives, I think that would be very, very compelling. Can you explain to our audience about how education really is the true root of fulfillment and prosperity in our society globally? Because again, I tell kids all the time, right? Do you want to be an athlete, or do you want to be the owner of a team that pays the athlete? And they think, oh, and they start to think. I'm like, yeah, being an athlete's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And again, if you want to do that, you were a basketball guy, I played football, great. But after you're done, right, JoJo, and I tell these kids all the time, no matter how long you play, you could be Tom Brady, you will retire from the game at some point as long as you are still living. It is just the way. And Tom played, 20 years? And now he's what? Broadcasting, right? So again, please explain from an educator's perspective, right, JoJo, how education is the true root of fulfillment and success globally.
Well, I think that education, first, we've got to think about it is in a broad sense, right? Education isn't always the formal education that we get. College and graduate school, that's not for everybody. And it's not that everybody isn't capable, because I think anybody can do it. But I think it's about what's your path in life, what do you define success as? And in order to be successful in anything, I don't care what it is that you want to do with your life, you need to have an education to be successful at it, right? Whether that be getting degrees, whether it be getting a certificate, whether it be, doing an apprenticeship, or whether it's just being mentored and learning from somebody. All of those things help us to understand better what it is that we want to do professionally. So as far as the uplift of communities and individuals, I think that education is it really still is a very important aspect of sort of how we can become successful, right? I don't think that when we talk about education, we talk enough about access and equity, right? So Some folks have access to any kind of education that they want, be it from a training program to the most prestigious, graduate school in the world. And other folks may not have access to all that. And so I think we have to try to work, and this is where diversity and inclusion, inclusive excellence comes into play, to make sure that people have access, that there's an understanding of processes, and we work with folks to bridge the gaps that exist between folks that haven't had the experience, whether themselves or in their family, to be able to move on to education or not, and really help them to feel psychologically comfortable going to these institutions, or to mentor, to apprenticeship program, to be able to learn.
Jojo, this is great because you made an excellent point. Education doesn't have to be formal in a university. I mean, there's different ways to look at it. And I think what's most important to me, I believe, is to gain what I call the wisdom. Because to me, knowledge is what you learn by reading something. Wisdom is what you experience and you've lived, and the life you've gone through, or the actions that you've gone through, to get a perspective on life. So I'm very big on wisdom because I believe that helps you to make decisions based upon your life experiences and what you've seen, not just what you kind of read in a book. Again, I'm all about reading. Now, I'm all about that, but I'm also about wisdom to help you and help yourself move forward. So, Jojo, please talk to us about the work you're doing now in Ohio, right? What are some initiatives you're kind of working on? Share with our audience more about what you're doing now, in your role in Ohio, because again, I love to kind of get more perspective on that and how you can kind of what you're doing now to help people from the educational perspective.
Mhm. Well, there's really two aspects of the work that I do. One is in higher education. I work at a college in Cleveland, and this is a new position for me. But my work in anti-racism and inclusive excellence goes beyond that, nationally and internationally. I work with presidents and other leaders at higher education, pre-K through 12, nonprofits, corporate, in order to help them to understand, even within this difficult context that we're living in right now, where DEI has been demonized in many places, thinking about what it is that we can do to ensure that everybody has opportunities to be successful, whether it be in your business, whether it be in your educational organization, whatever it might be, in your community, and trying to work together to overcome whatever barriers there might be to success for whoever, all of the members of whatever community we're talking about. Yeah.
Jojo, this is really compelling. So I would love to start with the anti-race work that you do. So, I live in North Carolina, so I'm in I I don't like to call it the deep South. I mean, I call it the South for sure. I think of like the deep South of like Mississippi, Louisiana, that type of area. But I still am in the Bible Belt South, and it's very difficult at times here as an African American. So, for example, when I ride down 95, sometimes going from like I live like in the Raleigh area, heading down towards like South Carolina or into Georgia, stuff like that. There's like this Confederate, like huge Confederate flag off the side of the road. I mean, you could see it from like half a mile away. It's ridiculously large. And I see that sometimes with people's, porches, things like that. And what I feel as an African American is sometimes, or a lot of times, people are just afraid of what they don't know or don't understand. And instead of trying to have a conversation with someone about who they are at their core, they just kind of say, well, you know what? I don't know you. I don't know anything about you, and I don't want to learn. So you kind of put this wall up. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, JoJo, and an individual who studied this for a long time, working it for a long time. You help people get more opportunities. And as an individual that's in the South, where do you think the racism, or where do you think people's ideologies or thought processes come from your perspective?
Well, first of all, I've spent a good amount of time in North Carolina. My youngest brother lives there,
Oh, very
BJ.
nice.
So shout out to BJ. And I think you brought up a few different things, right? So the Confederate flag is a good example that you gave, because the way that people feel about that really has to do with not just lack of education, but biased education, right? Education that is promoting a particular worldview, rather than saying, here's the actual history of this thing, right? And why people may have a problem with it, right? If you know the actual history, it was a battle flag, right, for the Confederacy. The Confederacy was built to try to maintain and enshrine slavery as an institution. And we can talk about states' rights, but it was about states' rights to make slavery legal, right? So the idea that this is some sort of symbol of culture and not the symbol of what it actually was is a false narrative that's been sort of perpetuated in order to make racism okay, right? And we're not taught the actual history. And again, I think it's important that we learn in a way that looks at source documents. I'm not saying that this is a fact. The people that were a part of the leadership of the Confederacy said this is a fact, right? So when we look at that, we need to be able, we also need to be taught how to have empathy for people, right? So if that's the case, and I'm not African American, can I understand that people of African descent are going to have a problem with this? People who care about social justice, people who care about equity and inclusion of all people would have a problem with this. That is something that we're not taught well enough too often, right? So we have a lot of people that wave the flag and that think, oh, anybody that doesn't like this doesn't understand. It's really about our heritage as Southerners. They're just not well educated on the topic, and it doesn't mean that they want to be either, right? There, there's this indoctrination that happens, and we're seeing a lot more of that now. And I think that it's important, if we're going to think about addressing racism in concrete ways, right? As we continue to do that, we're all of us that are trying to do this work are just abolitionists, right? We're all still doing that work that was started basically when the concept of race was introduced, and so on in the United States. So we're all still trying to do the same thing. And as we continue to do that, we have to focus on education, and intergroup relations, helping people to start to understand one another and communicate, right? Because that's another piece of it. Even well-meaning folks, if they're indoctrinated into this in school, in their communities, and they have no contact with anybody different from themselves, they're going to be stuck in that mindset.
You know, this is fantastic, Jojo, because you said it best. It's all communication. I heard this yesterday. Communication is not about how you say something, it's about how it is received by the individual you are speaking to. And that's a big point, because when it comes to the Confederate flag, like you said, it is a symbol of people trying to keep a race of people underneath of them, working for them. And that is what it is. And that's according to what you say. And again, that's kind of like what the Confederates, flag was a battlefield. That's what they were fighting for in that regard, against the Union, who wanted to preserve and have everybody treated equal. And ladies and gentlemen, the way I feel we need to really attack, racism is have more conversations with people. And I love what Jojo said. The difference is going to be about, diversity and thought process, right? The one thing about our company I love, right, Jojo, Ogden Ventures, I've got white female, I've got Lebanese male, I've got Filipino female, male, I've got people from the continent of Africa, male, female. We're very diverse, white male, right? We've got a very diverse group of people, because what I shoot for is people to give me different perspectives, different thoughts from their background, from their wisdom, to help us make the most informed decisions possible. Because in reality, that's the beauty of DEI, right? It's not just about, different people from this. It's not about different people who have the same thought. You want different people that have different thoughts, different viewpoints, different perspectives coming together, because it's like in professional and personal life, right? Jojo, if I'm dating somebody, I don't want going to agree with me all the time. Like I want to have a conversation. I want to discuss. I want to talk. I want to be able to have these type of dialogues with people, because at the end of the day, right, Jojo, healthy dialogue is what really moves the needle to be able to connect us on a deep level. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, what you're talking about with the diversity, sort of within your organization, people don't realize the benefits of having those diverse perspectives and wisdom traditions, right? There's well documented research, very well documented, that demonstrates that when you have diverse perspectives, genuinely diverse, not just people look different but think the same, genuinely diverse perspectives in the room, right? Coming from different wisdom traditions, different cultures, different personal and professional experiences, different fields of study, even. When you have that in the room, you make better decisions that are successful for longer periods of time. You're more innovative in the work that you do. And there's a lot of research that's showing that those are workplaces that are far more interesting to people, and you get more longevity, people that want to stay because it's an interesting place to work. And that there's respect for differences. So we have to think also not just about, oh, it's nice to have this, it's interesting to get different perspectives. If you want to be successful, diverse perspectives and wisdom traditions are important, right? And that's borne out in the research. Again, I think it's important to not just say, oh, this is Dr. Jojo's opinion. This is research. This is what we've learned over years of watching companies and realizing that this is what's been successful in different organizations, different places in the world. So I think that's a really important point to bring up. Yeah.
Dr. Jojo, I have two questions. Well, actually, one is a statement. I'd love to get your perspective on it. Steve Jobs, I feel, has one of the most compelling quotes around diversity, equity, inclusion, perspective, thought process. Love your thoughts on the quote. The quote: my hardest job at Apple was to create a psychologically safe environment where my trusted, diverse employees could share their perspectives without fear of being judged. What are your thoughts from Steve Jobs?
That's actually a brilliant statement. The reality is that just having people around the table isn't the whole job. The challenge is to make sure that everybody feels like they can bring their full self, that they can speak their truth, that they can bring that wisdom, like you mentioned, to the table. If they feel like they just have to agree with the boss, right? I've got to agree with Mr. Ogden, right? Because that's going to keep me here. If they feel like they have to fit in with their peers, right? Then they're not going to bring their own perspective, and the wisdom that tradition that they come from is not going to help inform your organization. So making people feel safe requires real work, because the reality is that the systems, even if let's say your organization is perfect, your systems are all fully inclusive and equitable. Let's say that the things that surround us are not. Our society is not just in North Carolina or Ohio, everywhere. This is something that is pandemic level problematic. We need to be able to say, we are in this organization, we value who you are, period. And we're going to demonstrate that. We're not going to just say it. It's not just in our mission statement. I'm going to listen to what you have to say. If I don't understand, I'm going to say, hey, I don't get that. Talk to me. Let me understand this. Let me understand where this wisdom is coming from and how it can be applied to making us more successful as a team, as an organization. That kind of work is not easy. And it's the reason why so many of these folks that are losing their jobs, that are senior diversity officers, are so important. These folks are so important because they are the ones that help create a climate and a culture that truly values and embraces folks from different perspectives in order to make the organization as successful as possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, great interview from Dr. Jojo. Dr. Jojo, last question for you. What do you feel is the greatest attribute you have in the work you do assisting presidents and individuals and people when it comes to education, racial relations or understanding, communication, dialogue, healthy, healthy work environments, inclusive work environments. What is one attribute that you feel, Dr. Jojo, has allowed you to continue to do your work at such a high level and be respected by your peers?
Well, it's tempting to just say authenticity, right? Because it's your show. But I think having an authentic humility is critical in this work, right? And if you're really honest about education, about learning, and about addressing these challenging issues of systemic racism, systemic sexism, these type of things, you'll be humbled many times, right? But I think the humility, if you have a genuine humility about it, you're willing to learn from other people and value other folks. I think that's probably I would think would be the best thing that I can bring to the table, is that's something that I really value. And I think there was something that was sort of instilled in me from a young age, from my parents and my grandparents, and also from my brothers, right? I learned a lot from them, even though I'm the oldest. It is possible to learn from your younger siblings, and they humbled me often. But to find value in that humility doesn't mean you can't be confident. But I think that having real humility really changes the dynamic in the work that I do.
Dr. Jojo McManus, thank you so much. If our audience want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Go to drjojo.com, and there's plenty of ways to get in touch with me there. I look forward to meeting folks that have seen me on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and have a conversation with you. I'm sure we could talk a lot more about all the different things that we have in common in sports and DC and all those kind of things. But I've appreciated this little bit of time that we've had.
Dr. Jojo McManus, thank you so much for joining us. Riveting episode, fantastic, insight, great dialogue. Again, connect with him. We want to thank Tactical Harmony for sponsoring this amazing episode and the authentic tip of this great interview. In life, if you don't understand someone or something, don't make a preconceived notion. Go have a conversation, dialogue with them. Healthy communication is the biggest key to breaking barriers in our world. So please communicate and then go from there. Again, my name is Marques Ogden. I am the host of the Get Authentic with Marques show. Thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic day.